I started dating and married my husband within a 6-week time frame. And that is not advice that I would recommend to anybody, especially now that I'm raising my own kids. I hope that that is not a path that they go down. However, in this situation, I would say that I did not know him. We hadn't been dating long enough to really have gotten to know him. However, I do believe without a shadow of a doubt that I married the person that God had for me to marry. I had been in a very toxic and on and off again relationship with my first serious boyfriend for over 3 years. And it had been unhealthy, it had been painful, and I had alienated all of my friends and my family in the process of just being stubborn and prideful and hoping that this person would be the person that I wanted him to be instead of who he actually was. So through those very painful years, I had eventually come to the realization that that was not who I was supposed to be with, that it was an unhealthy relationship. And so I had gotten myself out of it. And in the spring of 2010, when I came back to Christ and I came back to my relationship with Him, and I went to my first Amway conference, and I, for the first time, heard about business and entrepreneurship, and that lit a fire in my soul that I didn't know that I had. I remember sitting and listening to these entrepreneurs talk about doing business with their spouse and having fun and enjoying life together and working towards something together. And I realized then that that is what I wanted. And I remember going home and praying and sitting down and writing out, I'm like, God, this is what I want for my marriage. This is what I want in my husband. This is what I want our relationship to look like. I want him to be a man that follows after God. I want him to be somebody that loves entrepreneurship and that can join with me in this venture. And I also remember thinking, and I'm going to be waiting a very long time because there is no way that this person exists or that I'm going to find him anytime soon. And so I just remember having a peace about it and thinking, okay, I'm going to wait for this man. I'm going to wait for this person, and I am prepared to wait. What I didn't realize is that I was going to meet that man within a short few weeks, and very shortly after that, I was going to end up marrying him. And I remember I met him at an Amway conference, and I was literally in the middle of praying. We were on a break from a session. There had just been a husband and wife up on stage, and they were talking about business and they were talking about their marriage. And I was just so moved by it and so inspired by it. And I was sitting there just praying that for my life, just praying that I want that. And in the middle of that, somebody says my name, and I look up, and there is my future husband, and I swear he was glowing and angels were singing. So we had a rather quick conversation and then ended up walking away and really didn't think anything of it other than the fact that, he was very attractive. So later on, he ended up messaging me over Facebook. And he was living in Bozeman at the time. I was living in Great Falls at the time. And so that was in June of 2010. And so we had our first date at the end of June, and we got married at the courthouse in August of that year after dating that summer long distance. So very short, we might have spent 100 hours together, maybe not even that much, but it did not take very long for us to both realize that this was the person that we were supposed to marry. And I stress that because he and I did not know each other well enough that in our own wisdom, in our own knowledge, we even knew this person well enough to make that kind of lifetime commitment. But in that season, there was this overwhelming peace and this conviction from God that I was marrying the person, that He was marrying the person that God had intended for us. And so finding that it wasn't that we were following our own knowledge, but we were entering into something that we both very strongly believed that, okay, this is who God has for me. This is part of this plan. And that knowledge, that faith actually, that carried us through our first year of marriage, which was incredibly difficult because we were basically married to strangers and we were learning how to live together and do life together while at the same time trying to get to know each other. And then that truth ended up carrying us through even more difficult situations and more difficult seasons when we were trying to launch our business off the ground and raising toddlers and babies and going through financial crisis and anxiety and depression, and just through this season of just immense struggle and still not knowing how to lean on each other or even trust each other to that level. Just always in the back of my mind knowing like, God, this is who you had for me. This is the person that you wanted me to marry. And so that held us through, and it carried us through those difficult seasons and encouraged us to get the help that we needed and to get marriage counseling and to learn how to work through our issues and talk to each other. And through that, through working through those things and coming out on the other side of it, I can look back now and just every day look at my husband and just be like, wow, like, you're amazing. Like, I'm so glad that God chose you for me, and I'm so thankful, and just loving our life together and loving our marriage together, because we had to put in the work, and it wasn't easy. Just because that was part of the plan that God had for us didn't mean that it was easy, and we had issues and struggles and obstacles that we had to work through, that we had to get help for. But because we worked through it, we didn't just avoid it or get mad or even walk away when we were probably tempted to. We were able to work through it and to get to the other side and experience joy and trust and intimacy and vulnerability and friendship and just a wonderful, wonderful marriage that has ended up just being such a life-giving force within us. But it all started with just believing that who we marry isn't necessarily who we think we should marry, who we have a connection with, or like, oh, we've been dating for a while and so therefore it makes sense. But really marrying that person that you believe that God has a plan for you to marry, and trusting God in that, and trusting God to do what only He can do, because His plan and His purpose for our life is good, and it goes beyond anything that we can ask or imagine. And so when we trust God with our relationships, and we trust God with our marriage, and we trust God with the people that He puts into our life, we see a blessing come from that we could never have asked for and never have imagined.